putting that agent or starting that agent where you're going to surface it or think people are going to interact with it, maybe is the right
skate to where the puck is going to be. I like that. Yeah.
I even know that sports metaphor. I'm sure you're impressed.
Yeah, I kind of am. I'm kind of impressed that I know what it is.
All right, let's get going then, everybody. It is Ask and Praxis, the January 8th, 2025 first edition. Do you like our new colors? Hopefully you do. Copilot Agents in SharePoint is the topic today. So we're going to start with what is an agent. Patrick's going to help us learn about that. And then Todd is going to walk us through creating an agent from start to finish. And we'll talk about, Derek will talk about some things to think about that we sort of discussed as a group about things that we sort of found while going through this new feature and things that we think will be important when doing so. Mark, if he ever gets here, is going to do agent scenarios, and I'm going to give you a quick little nugget about provisioning agents because, yes, you can. So, there's Anderson. All right, cool. Patrick, I moved your cheese around a little bit, but hopefully you can talk about what an agent is.
You completely moved my cheese, and you did that after I last looked at the slide. So
yes, I did.
What is an agent?
It's grit. Here we are.
An agent is a specialized AI assistant that can connect your organization's knowledge and data sources to Microsoft Copilot. It's AI-driven agents assist users in performing a variety of tasks. Some of those tasks, they can offer suggestions, they can automate repetitive tasks, provide insights to help you make informed decisions, all those fun things that we look to our Copilot agents or IA to help with.
Absolutely. See, you did fine. Geez, you were fine. All right, we'll let Todd take over. He likes to pontificate. Show us how to create an agent, Todd.
Yes. So the first thing to think about when you're thinking about how to create an agent is where to create that agent. Anderson likes to talk about how AI and search are very intertwined and very similar. And this is another one of those cases where that's the case. When you do a search, you usually want to get as close to the information as you think you can get, and then you do the search and Microsoft scopes it correctly and all that. The same thing happens with AI. So if you want to make an agent that talks about HR data, you want to make it near your HR data. So you've got some options with that. If you, we're going to walk the process here in a minute, but if you get into a document library, a folder, or even a file, and you create an agent, that agent is going to be created in the same location as that item. So it'll be created in the folder, in the document library, in the file, or next to the file, whatever. You can also create an agent at the site level and give it the scope of the entire site. If you do that, then it creates the agent in the site assets library. It creates a Copilot folder and creates the agent there. And like I said, by default, your agent is going to be scoped wherever you create it. So it is good to be thoughtful about where you create your agents. You don't want to create them all in one spot and then try to point them where you want them. Go to where the data you want to interact with is at and create your agent there. You're not limited to that. We'll see in a couple of slides how you can add up to 20 different sources for your agent. But again, wherever the bulk of your data is at is where you should create your agent. And if you
maybe where it's going to be used, Todd, right?
So
if you're going to cross, sites with your sources, maybe putting that agent or starting that agent where you're going to surface it or think people are going to interact with it, maybe is the right
skate to where the puck is going to be. I like that. Yeah.
I even know that sports metaphor. I'm sure you're impressed.
Yeah, I kind of am. I'm kind of impressed that I know what it is. If you create one in a hub site, it will target all of the sites below that. Haven't done a lot with how that works with hub sites, but that was one of the things we noticed in the notes. So if you're using hub sites, agents are still your friend.
Absolutely. All right. So getting started.
Yeah, so we've drilled down to where our information is at. You can't tell because I blocked it with the dialog box, but this is a document library with a bunch of HR documents in it. So it's, PTO policies, employee handbook, that kind of thing are all in this document library. So you've got a couple of different ways that you can create an agent once you get in there. The easiest way is in the menu bar up there at the top. You can see there's a create an agent button. You can click that. If you click that, it takes you directly to this dialog box that you see. The other option is in the suite bar at the top. You've got a Copilot button. You can click that. That opens up a pane on the side, and you have access to all the different agents that are available to you. And then at the bottom, there's a button that says Create an Agent. You guessed it. You click that. It takes you also to the same dialog box. Now, when I created this agent, I did it in the document library. And so it called this agent the documents agent. And we'll talk here in a couple slides about how you can rename those. Documents agent isn't a very good name because, like Julie said, you can have these in different sites. And so they all have document libraries. If they're all named documents agent, how do you know what this agent does? So we'll talk a little bit about how to make that name make a little more sense. I also like the whole by Todd Clint. It's like a byline, like a book cover. Documents agent by Todd Clint. You can tell that I created this in the documents library because it says this agent is scoped to the sources. That's our documents folder. So we're in the right spot. It's all got all the right stuff. Now, one thing about this, nobody reads the text in dialog boxes, myself included. But there's some important information at the bottom of this one. It's crazy. Your agent is already ready already. So by just clicking that one button, you already have a functioning agent for your source. You're already done. You can already start using it. So at the bottom, we've got a couple of buttons. We've got an open agent button. We've got an edit button. And if I know the Ask Some Praxis audience as well as I think I do, we're more of the edit button folk than the open agent folk. So let's hit that edit button and see what happens. So when we click the edit button, we get this dialog box, and this has kind of got three panes across the top there. We'll talk about each of those. The first one is the identity pane, and that is where our name was. Now I filled this out. I like to, when I have dialog boxes and slides and stuff, I like to show the end, not the beginning. And so this is what it looks like after I went through and made some changes. In the number 2 box there, that used to say document agent. And now it says Helen from HR, because that's what our bot is going to answer HR questions. And I wanted to make it personal. I wanted to give it some personality. So I thought Helen was a good name for somebody from HR. Plus there's some alliteration in there. Everybody likes alliteration. And then for the third box there, I went out to ChatGPT and I said, hi, remember me when the robots take over? By the way, I'm making an agent that's called Helen from HR. Please make me an avatar. And so poof, just like that, I got this avatar, saved that out, uploaded it there. And then the number 4 box there, that is the description that folks will see when they're seeing their list of agents. They hover over it. It's going to say, this is Helen in HR. Ask her all of your HR questions. You want to give it, a little something so they can tell it from all the other different agents that are there. Interesting thing about this dialog box, at the bottom, we've got this button that says Add Advanced Customizations in Copilot Studio. That button is going to show up on all of the panes, so I'll cover that at the end and what options we have there. And then also we have a Save button. So again, this is just a file. It's an XML file. Julie's going to show us that in a few slides. JSON file. That's true. Oh my goodness, how embarrassing! You
admins and your ability to tell us, XML from JSON.
Us and our XML files. Oh, shame. So this is a file, and so we're actively editing this file. So you got the save button down there. You go ahead and save your changes. And I guess on the right, we're also going to see the test this agent button, and that's going to show up in all of the panes as well. So this is exactly XML is JSON for 50-year-olds. Now we're in the sources tab or pane in this, and this is where we're going to be able to modify the sources that our agent uses when it answers questions. Now our agent is already grounded in the graph, so in any of these agents we can ask, who is the CEO, these kind of things, and it's going to be able to figure that stuff out. But this is where we're really focusing on where the information that we want to interact with is at. Now, by default, this is what the default one looks like. I bring this up because it wasn't intuitive to me the first time I looked at it. I have one source. I have my document library that's got my HR data in it, and that's all that I want this agent to look at. There are other document libraries in that site, but I don't care about them when it comes to the scope of this agent. But I've got two entries there. I've got two remove buttons, more specifically. One of them is the site, and one of them is the document library. Now, we know that we can scope an agent at the whole site, but I don't want that. And so one of the times when I was in here, I clicked remove on that to remove that site because I didn't want the whole site in there, and it removed everything. Because in that number 4 box, we can add more document libraries and folders or even files, and those can be in different sites. So that number 2 up there is kind of a heading for where number 3 is at. So keep that in mind. Now, I mentioned
UI
before.
is so bad.
What? Oh yeah.
UI
Oh yeah.
is so bad.
Oh goodness. I hope it gets updated. So I talked about that save button in there. The first time that I did this, I was in there clicking around, and I'm blaming the bad UI. I saved that after I removed my only source. Now, I knew where my source was at, so it wasn't a big deal. But since this is just a JSON file out in SharePoint, it's got versions. So I just killed the wizard, went back into the file system, or went into my document library, rolled my version back, and got the previous JSON file for my agent, and then it had all my sources back in there the way that they were supposed to be. So that's something to keep in mind. Don't be shy about going in here and making all kinds of changes and trying to break things, because if you do, you can just roll it back to a previous version.
Probably could have added it back too.
I could have, but yeah,
but it was good to test. Yeah.
Yeah, and then, well, that was one of the things. I'm like, I wonder if that really works. And I went in there, and sure enough, there was like 6 or 7 different versions of my agent. Helen was in there, and all of her different personalities. At the bottom, we've got a handy little note that says we can also add knowledge from public websites, third-party sites, things like that, and do more of that in Copilot Studio. So we've got that to look forward to. And I think that's it for this slide. So now we're on the behavior slide. So this is kind of how your agent will interact with the users. So you've got a little welcome message up there. So I put something friendly. Hi, I'm Helen in HR. Ask me anything about HR. You can't stump me, that kind of stuff. And as soon as you make those changes, it's going to show up on the right. And so you can kind of see in real time what your end users will see when they're using your agent. Number 3, one of my favorite parts of this is the starter prompts. So we kind of have two things we can accomplish with these starter prompts. One is we can let people know just what agents can do. And by that, I mean how to interact with an agent in general. By default, we get some prompts in there, summarize any key highlights, create a fact based on these resources, kind of bland, things like that. But it gives people the idea that they can interact with this with real language. They don't have to try to use search terms, things like that. But I decided, since this is an HR site, I wanted to put in some of the more frequently asked questions that people have when they go to the HR site. So things like, what's the PTO policy? Where can I find a list of the company holidays? Can I bring my potbelly pig to work? The really pressing questions that people have when they go talk to HR. So the great thing about this is, number 1, it primes the pump and it tells people, here are the kind of things you can think about. But number 2, they can actually click them, and then it will go into the question box at the bottom. So when you put these frequently asked questions in, you can save people some time, because they can just click PTO, they can click potbelly pig, and it will go into the question box there. So I really like that. So give some thought to those when you're filling those out. Yes.
Todd, quick thing on that. Those are just limited to the 3, right? Like you can't add more. They're just sort of like they give you 3 kind of prompts out of the box. There's no real customization at this point in the SharePoint one, right?
So you bring up an interesting point. The UI only gives us 3, but this does save out as a JSON file, and they do show up. I mean, it's real obvious what the structure is. I don't know what would happen if you added a 4th one in there manually. That's a good question.
Okay. I'm assuming that maybe Copilot Studio is where you can do more of that advanced.
Well, yeah. So we'll get to that
a lot more.
Yeah. Probably the place to do that. But that's a good question. I will try that.
I would also say make sure you test those prompts first.
Yeah.
Make sure that they actually give appropriate results.
Yeah.
Although
and so
it is an AI, so
it's probabilistic. Yeah, it could go any way. And that's so Derek brings up an interesting thing. Once you start editing those starter prompts, they do change immediately on the right, so you can test them as you're going, again, to see how probable it is that you get the answer that you're looking for. Number 4 is a fun little box down there. That is, if you're familiar with other LLMs, large language models, this is analogous to the system prompt. This is a way to kind of prime the system with a prompt that has focus all over no matter what people ask. And so this one, I tell it, hey, your name is Helen. Please provide accurate information to any of the questions asked. Use a friendly, helpful tone when responding. And so that's something the end user can't see that. They don't know that she's been given those instructions. But that's just kind of a way to mold how your agent interacts. We did try to see if we could get Helen to respond with a mean tone when responding. That did not work. Copilot just gave me an error every time I did that. But we were successful in getting Helen to reply with a snarky tone. So you are able to have her respond, and she did respond in a snarky manner. So that's the case. And again, we've got some more helpful hints down there. Customized conversation workflows in Copilot Studio. So to Carrie's point, maybe that's the place that we do that. And then we've got that ever-present add advanced customization in Copilot Studio. Let's go ahead. And go to the next slide and click that. Yeah, so this is what we get. Every one of these panes has that button that says, customize in Copilot Studio, do all these crazy things in Copilot Studio. And they finally wear you down. You click that button and it says, coming soon. So I was kind of disappointed in that. I was hoping to get, see what the next step would be. I'm not much of a Copilot Studio user. I haven't played with it much. I don't see any obvious way to pull our .agent file into Copilot Studio. There's some importing in there, but it's looking to import solutions, not just individual files. So hopefully that will be coming soon, and we'll be able to do things like Carrie suggested, where we bring that into Copilot Studio, add 4 and 5 different starter prompts. I don't know, but I was kind of disappointed in that. Okay, so now we're all done. This is what it looks like. So you can see these are the files we've got in there: payroll dates, employee handbooks, PTO policies, things like that. And on the right, now we've got the finished agent, so we can see exactly what it is. If we go in there, if we click, can I bring my potbelly pig to work? You'll find out that we indeed can bring, if you've got a well-behaved potbelly pig. That is okay. The pet policy does allow that. So you wouldn't have known that hadn't you not asked Helen, the agent. And then if you see where my mouse cursor's at, all your other agents are going to show up in there. So if there's other, the snark bot, which is probably what the HR bot for some practice would look like, that will show up in there as well. So
I think it's just because you've got this context here. One of the things that you talked about up front was, where should I create this? Well, obviously that agent file has to be accessible to the people who you want to use the agent.
Yeah.
Right. So that's part of where you decide to put it.
Yeah.
But also realize everyone sees that file as sitting there as an agent file. Now, even if you can only read it, you open it up and it's JSON, but it's there, right?
Yeah.
So it's an artifact that is just sort of out there.
When you open it up, though, it opens up in like the agent
preview.
Like it's a dialogue of the agent, so it's not like you're looking at a JSON file, so it wouldn't be super confusing.
But it's not, the point is it's not, well, actually it would be if you published it, it would be sort of off squirreled away out of the way.
Yes. Yep.
But while you're working on it, it's sitting right there.
Yeah, I don't love that it's right there, because somebody could delete it. Somebody could just go in there and delete the file. I don't love that.
Although it'll be in the recycle bin because it's a file, so you can recover it. But still,
I guess permissions matter.
Yeah.
Well, and so that's a point. And I actually can't remember, so Derek, stop me if you're going to go there. But all those sources that you can put in that you talked about, a few slides ago, all the sources you have to think about the scope, because everybody needs access to all the content that you're trying to include in the scope, or it's not going to be included in the scope, right? Because it's just like search. So, that whole conversation of like optimize for Copilot, we've been talking about. We've talked about that before, but it's optimized for search, optimized for Copilot. It's the same thing, right? People have to be able to get to the content, or search can't find it. And Copilot people have to get to the content Copilot sees, or they don't, it's not included, right? So. All right.
Yep.
D.
All right. So we were going to talk about that on this slide.
Sorry.
But I think these are some important things to think about, is that your content matters, right? It's still all about content. Copilot isn't going to fix bad content or bad IA or bad organization. It's actually going to shine a magnifying glass right on top of it. So you want to make sure that the content in those documents actually answers the questions that people are trying to prompt. You noticed that in Todd's example, the name of the agent is the name of the file. So you can't have an agent, if Todd named it documents, Copilot or whatever it was called the first time. And that's what's going to show up in the user interface as people are trying to interact with it. So you want to be very clear about what that file name is. And did we test actually if you rename the file manually, if it renames the Copilot?
It does. Yeah.
Okay. So, you want to be careful of what it needs to be named. Keep in mind that if users have access to this Copilot, they could potentially see it across site collection boundaries. So just calling it documents or calling it policies wouldn't really matter if you've got multiple policy Copilots, multiple policy agents across the site. So agents are recommended across site collections. So if you have access to different Copilots, like that Copilot that Todd was showing, I actually have access to it and I can see it in a totally different site collection. It's showing up as that. The one thing it does is it assumes A, the user has access to the .agent file, and B, it's got to have access to the sources, right? If the user has access to the agent file, but not the sources, they're just going to get blank data. If they have access to the files, but not the agent, they won't see the agent. So it does matter, especially Casper had a question earlier about like, what does that do to IA and organization and whether or not the agent file should exist where it goes? I think it depends. And I think that we could potentially run into some permissioning issues and visibility issues if we start divorcing where the agent file lives from the content itself. And one really important thing to think about is agents give us a way and it give users an additional way to look at the same subset of content. It's just like search. It lets us search through the content or work with the content in a different way. Garbage in, garbage out. If you have bad content, you're going to get bad results. So let's go to the next one, Julie. All right. Now, there was one other thing that we were looking at. It was about approving the agents. Now, this is also where permissions matter. Any member in a site, anyone with edit access can make or use an agent. So if you've got edit access to a document library, you can edit an agent. Only owners have the ability to approve an agent. Approving, and so this is the top image there. Approving an agent really just makes it available to everywhere in the site. The other thing that it does is it allows you to set that as the default agent for the site. So when the user clicks the little Copilot icon in the suite bar, that's going to be the default agent that shows up. And so you can see in the second image where that second image is approved for this site. That's where it will show up when it's been approved. All right, next slide.
Doing my best, Vanna. Is anyone impressed?
Yes. Yes. Oh, look at that. I actually put transitions by mistake. Sorry.
I can't
Next.
Ryan. Oh, there we go. Now
okay. Now, one of the things that folks had sort of talked about, the agent file lives where you create it until you approve it. So this agent right here, Julie, I must have put transitions in by mistake. So just go ahead and hit next. Just go back one. Fudge. Oh, well.
I can't.
All right. So this one was not, the agent wasn't approved. So the agent file is going to live in the document library where it was created. Once it's approved, it gets moved to the site assets library. That agent file is then taken outside of the document library or its source and put in the site assets Copilot's approved folder.
All right.
And that's
we're moving
on
on now.
purpose. Yep.
Yes. Okay. So Mark, you were going to try to talk us through some scenarios, because I think that is an important, we've talked about how you get one, but why?
But
would
why?
You get one?
Why?
Yeah, but why? Why would you want one?
Well, that's a really good question. So we've done a couple of sessions in the past about a policy library. So that is one thing I wanted to just sort of highlight as an actual thing that we build all the time that we think could be potentially served by an agent. So a policy library, the idea is you have distributed policy libraries across different departments in your tenant, and you want to let people sort of reason across all of those libraries. We often build a solution with P&P Modern Search that pulls all those policies together into one page. That works just fine. But if you wanted to let people have a conversational interaction with that set of policies, you could set up an agent and add each of the sources individually. Remember, Todd showed how you can add sources. So you could add a source for each place you have a policy library, and then you're giving an additional, more conversational layer on top of those policies. The downside of that is if you added another policy library somewhere, the agent wouldn't know about it. You have to manually add those sources. In other words, it's not what I think of as IA aware. The fact that we're using a policy content type is irrelevant. There's no, star.policy or something capability in these agents. So it's just something to think about. So that's the policy library idea. The rest of the stuff that's on this slide all comes from that introducing Copilot agents page from Microsoft. And I put these up here verbatim on purpose because when I read them, I find that they say very little. And I'm not sure that I buy that a lot of these scenarios would be supported by an agent very well, unless you have incredibly good subsets of content that address exactly these needs. So, picking one at random, crafting personalized presentations. Copilot agents can help you develop customized presentations that address a client's specific needs and highlight the benefits of the company's products or services. That sounds wonderful, doesn't it? But what content would actually feed into that actually working well? Sort of open to debate, right? So I think if you read each one of these, they all sound sort of, I think of them as aspirational. Mm-hmm. The key here is, and Derek highlighted something I had added to that slide before, content really does matter here. What is the subset of content that we can wrap an agent around that is going to give people some sort of value by having a conversation with it? So each one of these, I think if you read them through, you would realize that you probably got some content work to do. So content first, as always, content. But these are the kinds of scenarios that Microsoft is highlighting right now.
Love it. All right, let me quickly hit provisioning agents before we run out of time. So I did ask SharePoint Engineering about this very thing. It is just a file. We've been talking about that all along. The file name is the agent's name, and it's not encoded. The file is just JSON. So in the background here, you can kind of see I have a highlighted. That's the full file. When you open it up, you can kind of see it. This is base64 encoded icon value, and there's these conversation starter list is in there, so we could test that out. Great question, Carrie, about expanding that. The one that I wanted to point out from a provisioning perspective is the section of the JSON file that's called capabilities. It's the place where you can specify what sites and lists and libraries you want to include in your agent. And so from a provisioning perspective, it's super easy to build out this JSON file with code, plug in the right URLs, list IDs, et cetera, and then provision that file into a site's document library, whatever. As far as approving it, though, I have not looked into yet, and I do not know the answer yet as to whether there is a API endpoint for approving. My history with SharePoint APIs would tell me that there isn't one yet. but I don't want to be too snarky, so I don't know that for sure. Mike, go ahead, quick.
A quick question. Can you explain what the difference would be here between this using just a document library versus a whole site from a syntax standpoint? Since you guys brought up that awesome tip about how the UI is goofy.
Well, I think it would keep you from having other, cruft in your site. If you've got multiple document libraries or multiple folders, you can not have the stuff from those other ones show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand the purpose. I'm curious what it would look like in the XML if the difference between sharing all of a site versus just a single library.
Oh,
Like you mean JSON?
Yes. Did I actually say
I don't know.
I think it just wouldn't have that the details of the library itself.
You would have to set it up, and I would suspect this type would be site, and you probably would not have the list ID, etc. So we'd have to test it out, but that would be my guess. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Since we are running out of time, some resources, you can click on those. They'll be in the our Ask Some Praxis page when that goes live. January 22nd, we have decided to talk about SharePoint Intelligent Versioning, which is a new feature. So we're going to talk through that. You can see us live. Community Days Miami is next. Mark and I will be there. The Microsoft 365 Community Conference, Mark, myself, and Derek will all be there in Vegas, and that's at the beginning of May. And then Mark, Derek, and I will also be at ECS in Dusseldorf, Germany. So join us at one of those live events. More to come soon. But thanks again for joining us as always. We look forward to seeing you on January 22nd. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on Ask Some Praxis. We love getting your questions or session ideas. You can submit by using the link in About. If you find this helpful, hit that like or subscribe button and share this content with your colleagues.